Hello and welcome to the One Life Church devotional series where we cover the entire Bible in 20 months. Well, today's chapters are Proverbs 19 and 20. Now, although the Proverbs are all mixed up really, there's all sorts of themes that you pick up as you go through a full chapter in this book. These two chapters are largely to do with wealth and with influence. Now, I'm in Melbourne. I've just come off a golf course, played some golf with some pastors. And we're in a very affluent suburb here. Behind me is the old colonial house, the land baron that is divided up as land, and these homes here in Melbourne in South African terms are worth between 10 and 20 million. So a great place to talk about wealth as we plow through these texts. Better the poor whose walk is blameless than a fool whose lips are perverse. So he kicks off by saying, I'd rather not be rich. But then he says things like this. Wealth attracts many friends, but even the closest friend of a poor person deserts them. Many curry favor with a ruler, and everyone is a friend with someone who gives gifts. The poor are shunned by all their relatives. How much more do their friends avoid them? Though the poor pursue them with pleading, they're nowhere to be found. Then he comforts himself a bit, and he says this, the one who cherishes understanding will soon prosper. So the reality is, money buys you friends. The reality is, influence gets you people for a season. But he says, in the long run, it's wisdom. That's what we're after. And then he gives some wisdom. He says, it's to one's glory to overlook an offense. If someone offends you, just suck it in. A king's rage is like the roar of a lion, but his favor is like dew on the grass. And so, do your best to live at peace with everyone, is what Paul would say. A foolish child is a father's ruin, and a quarrelsome wife is like a constant dripping in a leaky roof. Have you ever been in a roof that leaks constantly, putting buckets around the place? If you marry a woman that is constantly whining, constantly fighting, that's what life's going to be like. It's like, you know that dripping water on a head was torture in the Second World War. Houses and wealth are inherited from parents, but a prudent wife is from the Lord. I said this the other day. When I speak to a young man and he wants to know about marriage advice, I say to him, you know the best marriage advice I can give you? Marry a good girl. Marry a prudent wife from the Lord. Save you a lot of marriage counseling in the rest of your lives. Whoever is kind to the poor, verse 17 says, lends to the Lord and he will reward them for what they've done. That's a fascinating verse. If you are kind to poor people, you're lending to the Lord. So in other words, the Lord opens up a ledger and says, I owe you. And it says, and God will surely repay. God looks at how we handle the poor. And when kindness, it doesn't mean that you give them all your wealth. Kind to the poor, God says, okay, let me line that up. I am now indebted to you. That's what it says here. And he will repay. An amazing verse. Then it moves on to talk about disciplining your children. And the rest of this is actually about children not heeding the discipline of their parents. Let's move to Proverbs 20. Wine is a mocker and beer is a brawler. Whoever is led astray by them is not wise. We've just had lunch in a pub actually after our game of golf. And as I was looking around there, I thought a lot of people, I mean, this is a very sophisticated nation. But this particular guy I'm staying with here has got cameras outside. Why? And I asked him why. I mean, we're the criminals in Melbourne. He says, no, we live close to that pub. He says, and people wander here or past our house after they've had a drink. So wine is a mocker, beer is a brawler. They could brawl when they didn't even intend to brawl. Sluggards do not plow in season. So at harvest time, they come to look and there's nothing to harvest. It's a big theme that runs through Proverbs. Work hard. The harvest is around the corner. Do not love sleep or you will grow poor. Stay awake and you'll have food to spare. I love these texts. Food gained by fraud tastes sweet, but one ends up with a mouth full of gravel. Have you ever fallen over and had to spit the gravel out of your mouth? That's what happens when you take a shortcut, when you are unscrupulous. The Lord detests differing weights and dishonest scales do not please him. Our friend Luke asked the question. He says, why is this repeated numerous times through the Proverbs? Differing scales. Well, in the marketplace in those days, Branding wasn't there, wrapping wasn't there. What they would do is they'd take scales and they would weigh the product against the scales. Now, if you wanted to be a crook, you changed the weight of your scale. So you were selling less for more. And it says the Lord doesn't like it at all. And then finally, let's end with this. The glory of young men is their strength, and grey hair is the splendor of the old. And so it's basically saying, be contented when you're an old man. Don't try and mix it up and fight it up with the youngsters. And when you're young, realize that God has got old guys in your life for a reason. And so I trust as you read through this litany of advice that God speaks to you.